I've made a few videos now on my first DIY plug-in solar setup here, where I've got four 460 watt panels going through an 800 watt plug-in solar inverter. And this is what is called overpanelling, where you've got more panels than the inverter inputs are really designed for, with the intention of maximizing the generation in low sun months. I have these panels wired in parallel, and I've had some comments on the previous videos saying that I'd get more generation if they were wired in series. So in this video I'm going to go through the difference between series and parallel wiring, using my setup here as an example, so you can replicate the same principles for whatever inverter and panels you intend to use for your plug-in solar setup. First, let's quickly run through my setup. I have four JA Solar 460 watt single-sided panels. These were £96 each from City Plumbing. I've then wired them in parallel using these Y branch adapters, going into this EcoFlow Stream 800 watt microinverter. This has two solar inputs with a positive and negative port on each. So the southeast pair of panels is on this port and the southwest pair of panels on this port. The frames face southeast and southwest for longer daily generation and are reaching the inverter's 800 watt limit without facing south. Solar panel arrays are traditionally wired in series. This is where you daisy chain the panels together. So the positive wire from one panel would connect to the negative wire on the next, and so on. Then you take the negative and positive wires from either end of the string back to the inverter. When you wire panels in series, the voltages add up, but the amps stay the same. Wiring in parallel is where you connect all the negative wires together and all the positive wires together using Y branch cables or adapters. When you wire panels in parallel, the voltage stays the same, but the amps add up. So you have to make sure that the panel's potential peak output is within the operating range of the inverter's inputs. Let's look at this in detail using the hardware I have here, as this EcoFlow inverter is a common choice for many people in the UK and across Europe. The EcoFlow Stream 800 watt microinverter has two independent MPPT ports, each rated for up to 600 watt. The input voltage range is 16 to 60 volts DC per port. The maximum input voltage is 65 volts. The maximum input current is 16 amp per port, with the maximum short circuit current of 20 amps. The panels I'm using are JA Solar 460 watt panels. At standard test conditions, each panel has an open circuit voltage of 40.6 volts and a maximum power voltage of 33.68 volts. So in ideal conditions, these panels put out 34 volts. On the current side, each panel produces a short circuit current of 14.43 amps and a maximum current of 13.66 amps. So clearly, when using these particular panels with an EcoFlow Stream 800 watt microinverter, you should only connect one panel per port, as that is within both the voltage and the amperage range of each MPPT. But depending on your location, panel positions, angle and shading, it's likely the panels will rarely be at their optimum generation. Amps drop sharply in low light, often to just 10 to 30% of peak, while voltage only fluctuates a little. Cold weather pushes voltage up slightly and heat brings it down, but this is only by about 0.3 to 0.4% per degree Celsius. This is why I've overpanelled. If you were to wire a pair of these panels in series, the voltage would double to 81.2 volts, which is well above the inverter's 65 volt maximum. As voltage doesn't fluctuate much with light levels, this setup just wouldn't work with this inverter, and the inverter wouldn't even start. The panel amperage would have been okay though, at 14.43 amp. Wiring the pair in parallel results in a maximum voltage of 40.6 volts, which is well within the range of the inverter's input, but the maximum amperage doubles to 28.86 amps in perfect conditions, exceeding the 20 amp port limit. I'm overpanelling here, and yes, technically that risks damaging the inverter and voiding the warranty. But the EcoFlow inverter will cap to 16 amps per port if the panel amperage is higher. In reality, in my Oxfordshire garden, the absolute peak current should be rare, which is also why the panels face southeast and southwest instead of due south to spread out the midday peak. If I was in a sunnier location in Europe, then I certainly wouldn't be overpanelling on this inverter. So far it's running fine and hitting 795 watt generation during the day, but the individual ports are capping at around 395 watts rather than 600, which I can only assume it's because the amps are too high and the ports are capping to that 16 amp limit. And I do wonder if the inverter is running even hotter due to this, but I'll cover that in more detail in a moment. But we're in the middle of a heatwave, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this setup performs under normal UK conditions. If anyone else is overpanelling on one of these EcoFlow streams, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments, especially long term. So we're matching solar panels to inverters. We've obviously got to focus on the maximum values for safety, but in the autumn, winter and spring, with lower sun angles and cooler temperatures, production drops significantly and the panels will be well under that 16 amp inverter limit. Your panels might only make 20 to 50% of their summer output. So overpanelling and wiring two panels in parallel on this inverter should result in some useful generation during these months and worth the extra £96 per panel. This channel has had over 15 million views, yet only has 40,000 subscribers, whereas it should be 3 to 4 times that, because over 90% of the viewers are not subscribed. Please do, it's completely free, it's only a click for you and it really does help. So let's have a look now at what my setup has been generating over the last 5 weeks it's been installed. If you want to know why I've angled the frames the way they are and why the panels are mounted so steeply, I've covered that in previous videos, which I'll link below. If we look at the inverter on the EcoFlow app, we're currently getting 785 watts from this setup, with an equal amount of generation from each set of panels, because we're currently in peak midday sun. So if we then look at the history, this morning there's been 3 kilowatt hours generated already, and currently both ports are capping out at their maximum. And if I look at the previous days, it's averaging 6 kilowatt hours per day, and you can see that the southeast panels are generating more energy in the morning and the southwest panels in the afternoon, but there's still plenty of clipping at peak midday sun, even though these panels are not facing south. And then 15 kilowatt hours has been produced over the last 2.5 days, and 39.5 kilowatt hours generated last week. That's £12.36 worth of energy. But if I look at the EcoFlow smart meter, it shows that currently 640 watts is going out to the grid, which I don't get paid for. So in the summer, this setup is producing more than I can use in real time and more than the base load of the house, and even when the washing machine is on too. So the next step is to add a battery. I have found that my EcoFlow inverter gets very hot, even though it's shaded underneath the panels. But it's a well-known issue that these run hot, and we are in the middle of a heat wave, so it's no surprise. But I was wondering if the paralleled panels were generating too many amps, and while the inverter would be capping this, it could be causing excessive heat. So it's currently 2 PM in the afternoon. It's a balmy 32 degrees here today in the UK, and I've just noticed that my solar generation went to 0, and I think the inverter was too hot. I think it's done a reboot, and actually this is too hot to touch. So I think this had shut down. And then I looked at the app and one port said 0 volts and one said sort of 390 watts, and then the other said about 390 watts. And then the other port fired back up as well. So I have my suspicions that this just shut down, because probably I was supplying too many amps to it. So as a quick test, I've now disconnected a panel on both set of frames. So I've now only got one panel into each inverter port. So on the southeast frame, I have this closest panel working, And on the southwest frame, that furthest panel, I actually disconnected the wrong one. I had intended to leave that one going. But anyway, the sun is hitting these panels at the moment, so that one over there is working. And the results have really surprised me, because I was expecting one panel on each port in this weather would still get the full 800 watts, but it hasn't. The generation has reduced from 790 something watts down to 537 watts. So if we look at the inverter here, we can see that one side is currently producing 312 watts and the other side is producing 225 watts. So even in near perfect conditions like today, apart from the temperature of course, overpanelling is proving to be successful. Apart from possibly overheating of the inverter, because that is still very hot, even with only running 2 panels now, well, 1 on each port. So what I'm going to do next is try to find some metal and mount this on a sheet of thick metal, and that can act as a secondary heatsink. So this has been running for 2 hours at least with only a single panel on each port, and it's currently generating 463 watts. If I look at the generation there, you can see an instant drop when I disconnected a panel on each port. And after 2 hours, I don't know whether this inverter is still any cooler. That's still very hot to touch. So I did look at getting a sheet of metal to sit behind it to act as a heat shield, and I was looking at 6mm thick aluminium, but that was going to cost £40. So I decided against that for now because of the cost. So what I've done is put these nuts behind to lift it off a little bit to increase the airflow around the unit, and I've also put some screws in the timber down at the bottom to act as a spacer so it's not wobbling about or trying to sort of drop back that way. So that's got a bit more airflow around the unit now, even though the back plate of this isn't sitting on timber and there's quite a bit of airflow at the back. But I'm hoping by adding that 11mm gap there, that will just help with airflow, allow the hot air to rise, and maybe this is running a bit cooler. It clearly is, but you can't rest your hand on there more than a few seconds. But anyway, what I've proved is having 2 panels wired in parallel per port on that EcoFlow inverter is probably well worth it. Certainly it's going to be during those sort of low summer months, but even now at peak summer, and we've had an exceptional summer this year, it's still proving that doubling this up to 2 panels is getting that extra generation. But this is really going to come into its own over the next few months as we get into the winter, and that's why I've angled the panels like that. And what I will do is move these frames closer together so they are facing more south or even due south during those winter months, and then I can split the frames apart again and have them set up like this during the summer. So I'll probably do monthly generation updates on this channel, so do subscribe if you'd like to see those, and also have a look at the playlist which I've linked below if you want to see other videos I've done on UK Solar. Hope you found this one useful, and I'll see you on the next one. If you like the video, please do click the thumbs up button, and leaving a comment also helps too. Plus of course subscribe if you're not. If the video saved you time or money, a little support via Ko-fi or the Super Thanks button would mean a lot. There's over 1,300 videos on the channel, so have a browse, use the search, and have a look at the playlists. And here's 2 videos you may want to check out.